This morning in North Carolina, wheels are spinning. Determination is winning. A passion is now a thriving business, and it shows no signs of slowing down. How? The power of a conversation, like the one Clint Spiegel had with First Horizon Bank about starting a bike wheel manufacturing facility in Asheville. Now it's not just talk, it's rubber meets road. First Horizon Bank. Let's find a way. Go to firsthorizon.com/Clint. First Horizon Bank, member FDIC.
There's a fine line between genius and insanity, and we're walking it. It's the Marketing Madhouse.
I'm Moira Vetter, your host for Marketing Madhouse. Today, we're talking about marketing and building brands for nonprofits. My guest today is Seema Parekh, Executive Director of 48in48. I have the honor of serving on the board with you and supporting all the great work that the organization does in the nonprofit community. And I'm going to do this a little bit backwards. So ordinarily, we start with, tell us all about you. But 48in48 is an interesting name. So why don't we start with, what is that? And then let's talk about who you are. So what is 48in48?
Thank you, Moira, for having me. So what's 48in48? Very simply put, it's a local Atlanta organization that mobilizes skilled volunteers to build 48 websites for free for nonprofits in 48 hours. We've been around for 9 years now, and in the 9 years, we have supported 1,300 nonprofits.
It's crazy.
And mobilized 7,000 volunteers. And our biggest number is the value that we've given back to nonprofits. It's $32 million locally, nationally, and globally.
That's
included.
Crazy. I can't believe it's been 9 years. I mean, it feels like yesterday. And so that's 48in48. But the thing that is, ordinarily we'll have career marketers on the show. And I want you to talk about how in the world you got to where you are. So you went from a career in program management and operations to somehow being the executive director of a nonprofit. And we're not going to use the sucker word, but tell us, how did you do that? How does one make that career journey?
So if we can blame somebody, we can blame Jeff Hillmeyer.
Okay,
right? He's the co-founder of this organization. And originally what happened was our organization, my company that I was working for in 2015, reached out to me and said, Seema, we've decided to support a nonprofit and they're doing this digital work. And since that's your area of expertise, can you help get some teams together? What do you think we should plan for it? So I said, sure, no problem. I thought it was going to be a one and done.
Yeah.
Happy to help nonprofits. And was also thinking, you don't do enough nonprofit work, Seema, so maybe this is right up your alley because it's based on your skill set.
Right.
So I said, perfect. Let me go after this. Chased it, made it happen for the first event, and then my team of project managers came back and said, if they're ever going to do this again, Seema, they need you to help lay a strategy to make this happen during the weekend, because things were just all over the place. And to Jeff and Adams, I don't know, to them, they specifically created this organization as a one-time benefit to nonprofits, right? It wasn't meant to be.
We'll get you a site, right? That was that. Yeah. No, well, I think that happens with any organization that grows, right? You start with this great idea, and then you see if you can execute the great idea, and then all of a sudden it creates requirements, right? Requirements for people and infrastructure and direction and, consistency and all those things. Of course, I can also blame Jeff Hillmeyer for many things. A dear friend of mine, and we were in Leadership Atlanta together. And there's so much, focus on giving back and nonprofit. And, of course, Jeff has now poured himself into nonprofit. It's just really interesting to see how the organization has grown and really watching you in that role. You mentioned the co-founders, and I think very often you have people that start something, and those aren't always the people that come in to organize it or scale it, and provides, as you said, the things that are your expertise, program management and operations. I think about some of the work that I have done in the past with hackathons, and there's just so much going on. how did that happen? Did they come to you and say, we've got this thing out of the gate, but we're now at we need management? Or, I mean, literally, how did it happen? Who called who? What did they say after your company participated?
I honestly don't know how to answer that question. It's a bit of a blur. Usually somebody asks me to do something with it. If it's within my wheelhouse or I've got the bandwidth for it, I say yes. So I would assume I think Carol Williams, who was the leader of the organization at that time, reached out because the buzz was around who can help us do this. And my team members had also had already offered up my name quite freely. So then the call came through. I met with her, and then I met with Jeff and Adam, and it was like, okay, this is what we need to do. Can you do it? And the can you do it's always been my weak spot. Of course I can. If I don't know how, I'll figure it out, but I can do it, and I'll make it happen. And so my claim to fame there for the organization initially was building this platform and running it and making sure that what was on paper actually worked in real life. Because a lot of times, our plans are fantastic on a piece of paper.
Exactly.
But when you actually go to execute, didn't quite work that well. So I ran the first couple of events to make sure that logistically things would work across. Then fast forward a few years, a lot of other people joined the organization. A lot of people participated, shared their skills, shared their recommendations to help the organization grow. I took on different roles within the organization as needed. So I wasn't like a constant member of 48in48. As a volunteer, I did what I could, right? Kicking off the new cities or, which remember, this organization initially existed as an on-site only event. So we started in Atlanta and literally went up the eastern seaboard here, right? Having events in different cities. And that's where we would have an Atlanta event or a Boston event, Chicago, those types of things. We went up the board. And it was interesting to find myself in that space going, what do I bring to this table? What more can we do, right? And it was a fantastic collaborative effort, right? Which got me to this spot. A few years later, things weren't working as well as they intended them to be. So the back of napkin or even the documents and process that we had put in place weren't actually yielding the scalable results that we had expected. And when I say we, the collective we would be 48in48 and me kind of sitting around the side. And so Jeff asked me to come back into the organization a little bit more fully because I had a little bit extra bandwidth, and said, can you just give us an idea of what's broken? And
it really was interesting because I have been involved, since early days of the organization and participating on the board, and you use the word scaling. There really was a moment where it needed to shift, and you did really naturally emerge as a leader, and I'm so glad that they tapped you because, there really is. I think you said that about yourself. If you ask me to do something, I'm going to do it. And especially in the nonprofit space, you need people to be accountable. And you really have brought that. So it's going to be an interesting Marketing Madhouse today because we're not talking solely about marketing. We're talking about nonprofits and telling the story of a nonprofit and talking about marketing with a non-marketer. So it's going to be extra mad today. So thank you to Seema for being here, and we will be right back. And we're back on the Marketing Madhouse with our guest, Seema Parekh. So you're not a marketer by trade. We've talked about that. But, as an executive director and any senior leader in an organization, you're the face, you're the voice, which obviously you have a fantastic one. I don't think I ever see you without saying, can you record our company voicemail, please? or my personal phone voicemail. But, along with, standing up there and waving your arms around, you also drive the story of the organization, right? And that's where, marketing comes alive, when you can tell stories. And I know over our time today, we're going to talk about some of the stories of the nonprofits you've helped. But talking about, marketing for nonprofits, particularly at a time like this, coming off of the pandemic, which was hugely disruptive, and now the economy's strange. You hear a lot about the losers in situations like that, and nonprofits, often struggle. And so, we've talked about this. 48 and 48 is odd because it's a nonprofit helping nonprofits. So is it a double whammy? Are you doubly challenged? And what do you need to market 48 and 48?
That's a great question. It is a double whammy. Most organizations, when I say organizations, corporations or companies, look at 48 and 48 and say, we think you're doing a fantastic job, but we really want to support the nonprofit that you're supporting. So our goal, which is to improve digital marketing for these nonprofits, is kind of an oversight. It's seen as a step through, right? Mm-hmm. It's not really seen as we're actually teaching them how to fish. We're actually putting them out there and giving them a digital profile that they can be proud to share. It's professional. They can then go apply for grants.
Enabling them.
We are, right. And a lot of times it's skipped too easily by a lot of organizations that want to help communities and don't realize that we're actually helping in a very significant way.
Well, it's interesting because terminology that I hear a lot, whether it's in the for-profit world or the profit for-profit or nonprofit, is impact and outcomes, right? Everybody wants maximum impact and outcomes. And to me, and maybe this is just me, but to me it would seem like this would be a perfect organization to help because, God, Jeff's going to love this. The ripple effect of helping an organization like you is that, it's all these thousands of nonprofits that are helped. And so do major sponsors not see that connection, or maybe your major sponsors do, but do people not understand or think of it that way?
I think it takes a bit of storytelling and a little bit of magic dust to help them see those types of things, because maybe they're looking very directly at, I want to put my money into an organization that then is going to support the community. Mm-hmm. So they're not necessarily seeing that we're supporting so many communities. Or an organization may have decided that I want to help STEM related nonprofits or women's nonprofits or homelessness. Yep. And when we're asked, well, what category do you support? Every
all
category,
of
all of them. So somebody's probably thinking, you probably can't support all of them. Yeah, we do. Let me prove it to you.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we do. We really do. And so when I think a lot of times companies don't take that extra time to think through what we're saying. And I'll be the first to admit that maybe that's part of our marketing problem, because I am not a marketer. If somebody had ever asked me if I was going to go sell something, I would have said, no, that's not me. I'm your ops person. I'm your execution person. But what I have found myself doing is selling 48 and 48. I'm very passionate about this organization because I love what we do. I also think that the impact that we have on the community in general, on nonprofits and on volunteers is so incredibly significant that it's easy for me to talk about this.
It's one of the I think it's fun, all this occurs to you in real time, but I'm just thinking about the fact that you came from project management and operations, and this is the perfect place for you to be, because 48 and 48 is a platform, right? It is a platform. Like, there's good and bad associations with the word enablers, right? But you create a platform that makes it possible for all these organizations. And, that's where, back years ago when we helped with the branding, there was, we help the helpers. It's our code was very much about, that kind of follow-on effect, that ripple. So who else helps you tell the story? Like beyond Seema, who's trying to articulate this, and I see those facts and figures. I think also in the nonprofit space, you try to really use the stories and the emotions of the people that you're helping. But who else helps you market 48 and 48?
Our volunteers.
Okay.
So if a volunteer comes to us, regardless of which organization, and they are like passionate about what they're doing, they have a fantastic experience. They're going back to their companies and saying, this is what we should be doing. This is what we should be supporting, right? So they help us tremendously. Our nonprofits help us because with the output that they receive, they then can be a referral source for us. A lot of what 48in48 does or receives is through word of mouth communications, right? So we do our social media, and it's an in-house group of volunteers. Moto helps us distribute a newsletter, for example. So we can at least monthly get out what we're doing, right? And explain either a recap of a previous event or a new event that's coming up and how you can be engaged, right? So we use all of the platforms we can, but they are really right now done by our in-house team, right? Which is a really small team and may not have all the expertise, but we have the most fantastic volunteers that will support us.
You know, let me paint the picture a little bit more for people, because I know we've talked about helping build the websites over a 48-hour window, and that's where the 48 websites and 48 hours came from. But in terms of structurally, when you talk about these volunteers that are going back to their companies, often you have a sponsor company says, we want to sponsor a team, and that team could be developers, it could be designers, it could be copywriters, it could be project managers, all the skills that you see deployed when a website has to come together. And those individuals then work on a team that works on a collection of websites. And so when you talk about those volunteers going back to their companies, I just want to dig into this a little. How often is it companies are all signed up and on board and they tell their people they should do these things, versus you have passionate volunteers who find the development department of their large corporation and say, hey, I want to do this. Will you back me? Like, how does it work, that relationship between the volunteers and their companies? And how should it work?
How should it work? How should it work is the better. How it currently works is it's a hit or miss, quite honestly, right? You get somebody that's super passionate about doing something and they're all on going, I'm going to help you fix this problem, and they do, right? And a good example of that is when 48in48 initially started, we didn't have accessibility for websites. We didn't even think about it. Not that we didn't care, we just didn't know enough to think about it. We now have an accessibility team that has been implemented since 2020, and it is growing to make sure that all the websites not only are professional and good looking, but are also accessibility audited and checkmarked right at the end. And so different organizations and different volunteers will do that. I would love it if we could market to companies and say, look at what we're doing for our communities. This is the give back, right? Where else can you put your money and in a collective year, 9 years, tout a $32 million give back? Right. So if you're looking at your dollar and your ROI, we're the place to go.
Well, and not to mention, it's, Moto has we have our own do-gooder program, and we do things. And, sometimes you end up getting into a pattern with, we always go and support this group, or we go and support that group. And one of the amazing, and there's nothing wrong, everybody should be doing all the things they can in all the places. But one of the things that I do think is unique and fantastic about 48in48 is the breadth of organizations that you support. And so you really can, you can help so many causes in so many different ways, and I think that's probably a passion point. I know that there's the women's build, there's the social justice event, there's the global event. Can you just talk a little bit about that in terms of how did that come to be? What distinguishes those builds, and how does that change your way that you tell the story, I suppose?
Sure. So if we step back just a little bit, when we talk about companies and what they want to sponsor, right? Some will specifically say one of our pillars is sustainability, or our pillar is homelessness, veterans, you name it, right? They'll pick it. And so they'll say, well, what do you support? And we do get stuck with that, answering that question by saying every category. And we do get a sideways look when that happens, right? So we kind of say, why don't we take a pause on this and let's show you what we do. When we first started and we were a city by city organization, it was local volunteers building nonprofits in cities.
In local cities.
Local cities. So the Atlanta event would have Atlanta volunteers. Boston event would have Boston volunteers. New York, etc. Right? And then we also went out to make sure that the nonprofits they were helping were located in those cities. So you are giving back to your community.
Right.
What we found out very, very quickly was the cities that we weren't going to, we were getting calls, emails from them saying, when are you coming to
How do we do it?
Idaho? When are you coming to, another state? And we're like, well, it requires funding, requires a sponsor to give us like a home base. And then we need feet on the ground in that city or state in order to have this event happen.
To rally together those volunteers.
Exactly. So what happened very, very quickly, and this is due to the pandemic, was that all of a sudden our on-site events were shut down. We could no longer travel from city to city to do these things, or even jump over the pond, as I say, and go to England and do an event there, because we do have a global footprint. So we couldn't do these things anymore. So the decision had to be made. Do we stop or do we pivot?
Right.
Because of my experience in this particular area,
we pivot, baby.
We pivot, and we pivot hard. So we pivot from on-site events to 100% virtual events. As we pivot to virtual events, we can't now say this is an Atlanta event because you might be located in New York and you're participating. We had already started thinking about how we would expand our reach with 48 and 48. And so we were toying around with the idea of moving to a virtual or a hybrid type situation, right? But we weren't forced to do it. So we're taking our own sweet time to get there, quite honestly. And then COVID decided, no, you're not going to take it anymore,
right? You're going to step it up.
Step it up, or you're going to stop, right? So,
which I think is what a lot of nonprofits were faced with.
Exactly.
And,
yeah,
didn't make it through the other side.
100%. So then I had the idea, well, why don't we focus on some of the issues that we're seeing around the world right now and what people are talking about? And one of the things that I always hear is there aren't enough women in technology. There aren't enough women doing this and women doing that. And I know a lot of absolutely fantastic women, so it's hard for me to relate to. But I do know that in my roles in corporate world, I have been the only woman at the table, and I've also been the only woman of color at the table. So I've gotten used to that, or I had gotten used to that, simply because that was just my world. Here was an opportunity to expand on it. So by creating the women's event specifically for women, it was that only women team members can build the website. So
so it wasn't just in service to women's charities, nonprofits. It was women are doing this.
The women are doing it. So initially, phase 1 was only women will build a website. Phase 2 was only women will build the websites for women's charities. So we are in our phase 2 right now. And we give preferential treatment to that, right? Or selection through our selection process. We're not saying that males are not allowed at our events or anyone else that identifies across, right? We're not saying that. We're just saying that we really want to focus this women's event on showcasing the talent of women.
This is where the swell is going to be for this
event.
Part
right.
of it.
We're going to help networking. We're going to help you improve your skill sets, because when you're around other smart women, smart people, it just happens naturally, right? So that was our whole purpose. So then from then we expanded on to say, all right, well, we've had so much participation from this around the world. And even though we weren't promoting our events around the world, they became global. They came global. With some of our great partners that are global organizations, then they would send this message out that we're supporting this event, please sign up. And before we knew it, a non-global promoted event suddenly has representation from 10 different countries.
It's crazy.
Right? And then we move on to a social justice event, very, very specifically supporting the causes of DE&I, and then also social justice, right? Anything associated with civil rights and things like that. And that's our social justice event. And then our third big event of the year is the global event. And this is the one that has the calling across the board. Wherever you're located, wherever your nonprofit is, if you go through our coursework, complete the work that needs to be done, we will find a team to build your website. All the websites were built in English, except for last year when one website was built for the Girl Scouts of Paraguay in Spanish. because we had a content provider that says, I can do this in Spanish. So we paired them
That's
up
amazing.
with a WordPress person, and the two of them worked together with the team, and that was our first non-English website. That was
I think, again, this is so innovative. It really is that we're going to, build the plane while we fly, change the tires while the car's moving. But, you even talked about a phase 1 and phase 2 of the women's build, like that evolved. And, similarly, it's, each of these areas, as the need changes, you're evolving that model. That's how you stay vibrant, and that's why this organization is going to scale.
Well, we always have to have a roadmap, right? So if you ask me what phase 3 is for the women's event, I'll say that I'm trying to build through a mentorship program now to bring more women into this space, expose them to these skill sets for women, by women, and then help them get to a point to where they'll already be networked with somebody by the time they've built a portfolio. And when they're looking for a job, guess what? They've got somebody to call.
Exactly.
Right? So there's always a plan, right? For each of these events, you see part 1, but part 2 is already in progress, and part 3 is on the paper.
Well, what's interesting too, because the organization itself is so volunteer centric, I feel like, and you may not find this to be true, but I think that in companies and corporations where people have jobs, they have ownership, they want a voice, they want to decide how things go. And I feel like sometimes people don't want input into how things could be changed or improved because that's not your area, or that's my area, or here's how we do it here. And I feel like in this environment where you've got some really inventive people who are trying to have outsized impact, but it's all volunteers, you don't have so much of that. That's my area, stay out of it. And I think there has been a lot of experimentation.
Yes, you're right, Maura. I feel like we're all skilled in something. We choose our skill, right? Like I'm really good at operations work. I'm very good at executing things. And when it comes to seeing a roadmap or creating one, like that strategy, that's me. I'm not your marketer, as we identify.
You totally are. You're just not official.
Yeah. I have an honorary title.
Yes.
But I am not that person. I'm not the creative person. I can tell you it looks good, but I can't make it. So at the end of every single one of our events, what we do is we hold a lessons learned. Every single event. And it's the planning committee, which is completely made out of volunteers, probably about 20 people deep on a regular basis, that say, we're going to help you do that. We're going to help you run logistics. We're going to help you with social media. We're helping you with marketing, recruitment, whatever you need. So we've got subcommittees in our planning committee that are always driving us forward. We gather them plus any other person that wants to participate in our lessons learned to say, what did you see? What did you think we did really well? And then where are the challenges, right? And what do we need to fix? And then we prioritize those challenges and we work on those. And we identify a couple of people to lead that. Obviously, from one event to the next event, we have a 12-week planning period, right? Before we can actually execute to the caliber that I need this event to be. Then we don't have an opportunity to implement every request that's been made, but we do pick the top 2-3 things and say, how can we get those moving along, which includes technology, advancements that we've made in technology and tools, right? We've implemented...
Well, those platforms that were implemented, I know, during the pandemic, even just from the standpoint of not just leveraging them to build websites, but for instance, the judging. I've been a judge
portal.
The judging portal was just...
Yeah, back in the day, I think it was print out the homepage, put it up on a wall.
Have a score sheet.
Have a score sheet, let the judges walk through and make numbers and then sit down and
then you moved to giving us laptops, right? There was evolution there.
There was evolution, slowly but surely, and now it's a whole full portal where you're basically seeing a before and after. Call it a weight loss commercial, call it whatever.
That was a critical thing because, again, everybody's a winner. So, judging is judging, haha. But really seeing it's a testament to these volunteers that, oh my gosh, look at what they were able to make happen. And, you think about what that does for the nonprofit in terms of their credibility, their ability to be marketers for their cause.
Right. And that's kind of what we're doing, right? We're teaching them to fish in this manner, we're improving their digital platform. This allows them to go apply for grants and foundation money that they wouldn't ordinarily get. If you and I were to stumble upon a website and it looks like it was made in the back of someone's garage, we might kind of go, hey, is this legitimate or not?
Right.
But with a professionally built website, you're like, yeah, this is good. I'm going to go ahead and do this, right? So there are a lot of pluses, I think, that come along with what we do that most people don't necessarily think about naturally.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, we're coming to the end of this segment. A short answer question here. When is the next event?
So the next event is October 6th through 8th. It is hosted at Cox Enterprises, and we need local build volunteers to help. It is a hybrid event, so you can actually register online to be a part of a virtual team. Or you can be a hybrid team or a full-on on-site team. Cox Enterprises has been gracious enough to give us their space for the entire weekend, so we're excited to be
fantastic.
there. Kickoff will be Friday evening at 6:30, followed by a dinner for on-site volunteers.
I think it's on my calendar.
Yeah, it is, and I will be looking for you, Moira. But we are looking for volunteers right now to build these teams. Every volunteer that signs up and gets assigned to a team, we want them to know that we're holding them accountable for being there.
Right.
Because if they're not there and their team falls apart, that means that nonprofit that's already done all the work to be in our event can now may not receive a website because we don't have an extra person to fill your slots.
Well, we've all been a part of that project in school, right? The group project with the one person that never said. So don't be that person. Sign up and don't be that person.
Yes.
This is Marketing Madhouse, and we will be right back with our guest, Seema Parekh. This is Moira Vetter, and we are back with Seema Parekh on Marketing Madhouse. So we've been talking a lot of warm, fuzzy, doing goods, making change, making things work. And, in the real world, everything doesn't always go as planned and isn't as we would have them be. And so, we talked a bit about all this change that occurred going through the pandemic. And, of course, the economy is a bit strange. What are some of the things that have happened that aren't as you would have them be and that you need to do something about to kind of get to this next stage of growth for 48 and 48?
So two big things that happened is that we, one, lost major funders for 48 and 48. So we had to completely redo how we do our work, right? We literally were started over again as a little startup, right? Because we lost so much funding. And we relied more heavily on our volunteers due to that, right? Till we found the sponsors to sort of back us back up, and we're working on it. So there's slow in progress, and so we would love to have some more sponsors to help us do what we're doing and scale our organization and support more nonprofits. The other thing that we lost, I feel like, was support from agencies. When this organization started, we had agencies everywhere wanting to be a part of it, sending a team.
It was competitive, too.
It was very competitive.
Is there a team from this agency, that agency, the other? Yeah.
And now it's really hard pressed to find that for multiple reasons. We know that agencies went through a huge feast and famine. And then there's been a big life cycle or lifestyle shift as well and things like that. But I'd love if we could re-engage agencies.
Right. Well, and we all know that doing things that make a difference is more important than it ever has been. So, of all the things, I think a return to some of those priorities, and I think maybe another thing that's different that maybe the major sponsors and the agencies don't know are all the strides that you've gone to create hybrid every kind of flexibility to help people be effective. It's not taking, days and days and weeks away from people. It really is a very efficient event if people can be spared to focus on it.
Exactly. I always like to tell everybody it's a 48-hour event, but you do eat, you do sleep, you do take breaks.
Right.
And it's very important for people to know that. We've structured the program to where it can be extremely effective from a Friday evening to a Saturday.
Yep.
The whole day Saturday, that's your whole work day. And then, half of Sunday. Then you go home and have dinner with your family. right? So we've got it sorted from that perspective for sure, right?
Yeah, not like high school when we had the fundraiser and we all were in rocking chairs all night watching scary movies so we could stay awake. No, so this is not that. You're gonna sleep, but more importantly, you're gonna do really important things with great people and make friendships and bonds that really last, because I have definitely seen that happen. So let's take a pivot here. Again, pivot's going to be one of our big words today. But on the Madhouse, we like to talk about madness and crazy things. And you have a story of something that happened to 48 and 48 that was definitely crazy. Can you talk about I don't remember what year it was. It might have been 2018 or 19. But what happened that was so crazy?
So 48 and 48, obviously, like any organization, has a certain amount of time to plan an event. We book our venue, we make sure we've got our speakers right and everything. And here we are, Monday of the event starting on Friday. And Monday, our team gets a call that says, hey, the venue that you booked is no longer available. We have 300 plus people signed up for the event. That's
and we don't know where they're going.
We don't know where they're going to go now. We have no idea. We've got nonprofits that we promised websites to, and we have a host of volunteers who we're trying to find direction for. So I can't remember who we can attribute this idea for the solve for here, but we were able to find a venue that was under reconstruction, right? Because it already existed, it was fine, it was just having a redo, and we basically marketed the space at the underground, which was being redone. And it didn't have flooring, so it was
like walking into a construction zone, because I remember tarping, and the door didn't look like a door, and
we had a few challenges. We had a guard at the door for the weekend, and then the floors in the building were sticky, and because they had pulled up the carpeting, because they were going to put new carpeting down or new flooring down, so it will forever be known as our sticky floor event.
There was a good buffet, I remember.
There was great food. We've always had wonderful sponsors for food and stuff like that. We had music outside in the little underground courtyard, I remember. So there were some fantastic things about it. But when you got into the building and you were trying to use the Wi-Fi was great. It was just the floors. Pick your feet up a little bit harder, you know. But yeah, it was quite interesting. But at the end of it, we did what we came to do.
Yes.
The volunteers made it. Maybe some made it a lot later than they expected to, because they didn't realize where they're going. Some may not have made it at all, but at the end of the day, we did get to service the nonprofits. And I can't tell you exactly how many nonprofits received websites that weekend, because it all depends on the volunteer, right?
Yeah.
Our three-legged stool: volunteers, nonprofits, and sponsors. We need all three to make this happen. So if something falls away, okay, we're going to find a Band-Aid to fix it, right? But that's kind of where we live. That's our world.
I love that story. And, I think marketers can certainly, relate with that, whether it's putting on a large event. I mean, things change. Things change you've got to just be ready to go, okay, it's not going to come off in that way. How are we going to move? And I do think everybody's very flexible. I think the organization is a very positive group, which helps. It. I know you said you're a control freak, but you smile a lot for a control freak. So usually when we talk about, we kind of come into the end of the podcast, we talk about visionary marketers and marketers who are doing all the things that matter in terms of being a strong brand, in terms of their customer base, helping their employees, and really making sure that they're kind of an employer of choice, and then also making a difference in the world, more broadly. And I think, in our case today, we're talking about nonprofits. And so I'd kind of, instead of talking about, these are great companies that do all the right things, I think it might be nice for us to shine a light on some of the nonprofits you've served. And obviously you've talked about thousands of organizations, but I think there were a couple of examples that you had of really great stories of people who and maybe this is a plug for the potential major sponsors out there, which is, if you are one of Atlanta's fortune companies, you should be a major sponsor of 48 and 48. But for some of these companies who maybe do have the concern about what does our money go to and how do we show impact or outcomes, talk about, I think the first organization you mentioned was Project You First. Talk a little bit about that.
So Project You First is a local Atlanta nonprofit, and its mission is to provide hygiene products to the homeless. Mm-hmm. And when they came to us at one of our events a few years ago prior to COVID, we built their website. Mm-hmm. Upon building their website, I reached out to the executive director of that nonprofit to just see how things were going. And she's like, I can't talk to you right now because I'm driving over to Tyler Perry Studios to pick up a van.
Unbelievable.
And I was like, I don't understand what you're saying.
Right.
Are you going to be in a shot or something? Are you going to be on TV? And she goes, no. He's heard about our work. Mm-hmm. He saw our website, and he's donated a van.
Given us a van. Yeah.
So that we can now instead, we can hold more items for the homeless, and as we drive around we can service more homeless people. So I was like, well, that's fantastic. Mm-hmm. Right? So that's the one. And another one that I think is also very important, which is something that all nonprofits that speak to us about, is like, we just need money. Mm-hmm. Every single nonprofit needs money. We need money. 48 and 48 needs money, right, in order to run and fulfill our mission. Mm-hmm. So there was a lady by the name of Tanya Hicks. She started a nonprofit called Empower Our Youth Foundation. Mm-hmm. And that was very specifically an anti-bullying nonprofit. Her children were bullied in school, so she's like, I've got to do something about this because parents don't have enough information on what they can do. Mm-hmm. Schools are great. They provide us some resources, but we need more. So she created this nonprofit, came to our event. We built her website at a women's event. 8 months later, she came back and I got a lovely note from her and said, Seema, because 48 and 48 built our website, I've now applied for grants and brought in $30,000 to support our mission. Which is huge.
Yeah.
Absolutely huge. She's also become a huge advocate for 48 and 48 and comes to our events now just to speak to other nonprofits on how she was able to use our services and expand on them, give more exposure to her organization so that other nonprofits can learn from her. Mm-hmm. Right?
Again, it's ripple effect.
It is.
This is seed money that creates a much broader influence, than people imagine. And, in terms of what all that has to do with marketing, I feel that building a website for a nonprofit, a fundamental thing to marketing is being credible. And, we've talked a lot about, having a website that works in 2023 is, like food and water, right?
It's your calling card.
Right. It's your calling card, including having a donor form, right? Or how people can give you money. I mean, just think about that. You go back, and Atlanta's a huge hub for payments companies, major donors out there. Payments companies, in terms of the platform that you create and these donations that you can help those nonprofits collect.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts, wishes, asks, demands of the audience? What does 48 and 48 need to continue being amazing?
Amazing volunteers. Please continue to sign up and register for our events, and then also sponsors. That's what we really need in order to do the work we're doing, to continue to scale and expand and tighten the wheels on what we're doing, right? So those two things are very, very important. We have a very strong nonprofit pipeline right now. We have over 200 nonprofits looking for websites. Global event will be our last event for the year, and then we'll kick next year off with a women's event. So any support that can be provided, even from a sponsorship dollars perspective, allows us to have an additional event, which would then result in supporting more nonprofits. So it's a giant circle. So wherever you feel like you fit in, please join us. Right?
Well, and actually you make a great point. We've talked about women's event and social justice and global, but I know that in the past, if a major sponsor had a point of passion or wanted to put on a specific thing, you now have a platform that you can
corporate
help
events,
them,
right? Yep. So we can also do corporate events, and corporate events specifically with some of our sponsors we want to engage our employees because we want to show communities that we are giving back to the communities. So different organizations have a target, 25,000 volunteer hours by 2025, something like that. Well, come to a 48 and 48 event, and one person earns 48 hours of volunteer time. So that's something that goes towards that individual at the company, plus the company's numbers, right, to help them get to their targets that they need to get to or want to get to. But we do know companies today that are giving back to communities and show involvement in communities are then further used by other people, right? Like we look for those companies now. If you're giving back, we're going to give back to you, right? And we also, I mean, it kind of works hand in hand. The nonprofit has a fantastic website. Well, we already know 75% of the people who drop out of a website will be because they look at it and go, oh, it doesn't look legitimate. But imagine if you can grab that 75% for a nonprofit. Right. That can only be done if we've got the volunteers and the sponsors to tie it all together.
Yep. No, it's amazing work. You know, we love 48 and 48. We're honored to support the organization with all the things, because when Seema asks, she gets what she asks for. And we'll continue to, but, you know, anything that we can do to continue helping 48 and 48 thrive. Again, we want to see everyone at the hybrid event, which is going to be October 6th through 8th. And so you can log on to 48in48.org. So again, nonprofit here, people, .org, don't .com it. And again, so you're looking for volunteers, sponsors, and separately, if you're a nonprofit, you've talked about this vibrant pipeline, same thing. There is a way on the website to engage with the organization and work your way into the pipeline if you need support. Seema Parekh, thank you so much for being here today. Remember, there is a fine line between genius and insanity, and we're walking it. I'm your host, Moira Vetter, and we will see you next time on The Marketing Madhouse.
A lifetime of hard work, children laughing in the kitchen, family photos on a restaurant wall, a legacy that lives on. It all comes from the power of a conversation, like the one Tommy Hall had with First Horizon Bank about taking over his father's Charleston-based restaurant business. Now the table is set for a whole new generation. First Horizon Bank. Let's find a way. Go to firsthorizon.com/Tommy. First Horizon Bank, member FDIC.